Caravan routes through deserts, a journey across ancient sands. Welcome to another restful journey on the Sleep Room. Tonight, we travel back through time to experience one of humanity's most remarkable achievements, the ancient caravan routes that cross the world's most formidable deserts. As you settle into comfort, allow yourself to drift into a time when vast networks of trade routes connected distant civilizations, when camel caravans traversed endless seas of sand, and when the promise of distant treasures drew merchants and travelers on journeys that would last for months. Let your breathing slow and deepen. Feel the weight of your body sinking into your bed, as heavy as the precious cargo that once swayed on camelback across shifting dunes. With each breath, you are traveling further from the modern world, back to an age when the rhythm of a camel's footsteps was the heartbeat of global trade, and the desert itself was not a barrier, but a pathway connecting continents. The dawn of desert trade. Our story begins in the vast expanses of North Africa, where the Sahara Desert stretches across an area roughly the size of the continental United States. For thousands of years, this seemingly impassable barrier separated the Mediterranean world from the kingdoms of West Africa. Yet human ingenuity would find a way to transform this hostile wilderness into one of the most important trade routes in history. The key to unlocking the desert's secrets came from Arabia. The dromedary camel, with its single hump and remarkable adaptations, arrived in Egypt around the 9th century before the Common Era. These extraordinary animals possessed abilities that seemed almost magical to ancient peoples. Their bodies could regulate heat through specialized sweat glands. Their eyes had double rows of eyelashes and closable nostrils to protect against sand. And most remarkably, they could drink up to 25 gallons of water at once, then travel for days without another drop. But camels did not become common in North Africa until the 4th century of our era. Before then, caravans of horses and donkeys had attempted to cross portions of the Sahara, but their limited carrying capacity and greater need for water made such journeys rare and dangerous. The camel changed everything. These ships of the desert could carry loads of 350 pounds in hot weather and up to 1,000 pounds in cooler conditions. They could travel about 48 kilometers per day, day after day. The Roman writer Pliny the Elder, writing in the 1st century, noted that caravans were already being managed by the Garamantes, ancient Berber peoples who lived south of Libya. The Garamantes controlled the date palm oases at Fezzan and acted as middlemen between North Africa and regions far to the south. This arrangement would continue throughout the history of trans-Saharan commerce. Those who controlled the desert, who knew its secrets and could navigate its formidable challenges, also controlled the trade. These early Berber guides developed skills that bordered on the supernatural. A true desert guide, known as a kabir, could navigate by the stars at night, or if necessary, by the scent and touch of the sand and vegetation. They understood the proper rules of desert hygiene, knew remedies for scorpion, and snake bites could heal sickness and mend fractures. They memorized the locations of wells and springs across hundreds of miles of shifting landscape. They used countless subtle indicators of direction, the height of the sun and moon, the lay of the land, distant mountains on the horizon, the shadows cast by dunes, wind direction, the spray of sand blown from dune peaks, ancient eroded, gullies, the distribution of rocks and pebbles, and even the position of camel dung, which pointed in specific directions depending on how the animals had been positioned. The Golden Age begins. The trans-Saharan caravan trade truly flourished from the 8th century onward, with the rise of the Islamic North African states and powerful empires in the Sudan region. By this time, several major routes had been established, each with its own characteristics and challenges. The westernmost route began at the Niger River and passed through the salt mines of Tagaza before reaching Sijil Masa in Morocco, just north of the desert. This route became famous for the trade between gold from West Africa and salt from the Sahara. Mediterranean economies were perpetually short of gold, but controlled vast salt deposits, while the West African kingdoms possessed abundant gold, but desperately needed salt for food preservation and human health. The central routes included the Gadam's Road, which ran from Gao on the Niger River north to Tripoli, passing through the territories controlled by various Berber tribes. Further east, the Garamantean Road, also called the Bilma Trail, passed through the great sand dunes near Bilma, where rock salt was mined in enormous quantities. This was considered the easiest of the three main routes, though easiest is a relative term in the Sahara. The easternmost route, known as the Darb al-Arbain, or Road of 40 Days, connected Darfur in Egypt for transporting gold, ivory, spices, wheat, animals, and plants. The Romans later protected this route with forts and outposts, some guarding settlements complete with cultivation. Preparing for the journey. Imagine yourself in the year 1200, standing in the bustling market city of Sijil Masa in southeastern Morocco. The sun has not yet risen, but the city is already alive with activity. You are about to join one of the great caravans preparing for the journey south across the Sahara to the legendary cities of Timbuktu and Gao. The caravan has been weeks in preparation. The leader, the Caravan Salah, has been recruiting merchants, negotiating with guides, purchasing supplies, and ensuring that enough camels are available for the journey. According to the medieval traveler Ibn Battuta, who crossed the Sahara in the 14th century, an average caravan numbered about 1,000 camels, though some swelled to 12,000. Animals. The camels are being loaded with remarkable efficiency. Each animal will carry 2 parts of a load, secured on either side of its back. The goods are diverse and valuable. Salt from Tagaza, cut into thick rectangular slabs weighing 90 kilograms each, forms much of the cargo. There are also foodstuffs, cloth, perfumes, and luxury goods from the Maghreb region. Some merchants carry silk, cotton, and horses. Books wrapped carefully in leather are loaded onto the steadiest camels. For these, precious volumes carry the knowledge of the world. Treatises on astronomy, medicine, mathematics, philosophy, and religious texts. The camels are linked together head to tail with ropes passed through nose rings, forming strings of up to 40 animals. 3 or 4 strings will travel abreast when the terrain permits, or the entire caravan will move in one long line when passing through difficult areas. The Berber guides move among the animals with practiced ease, checking ropes, adjusting loads, calming nervous beasts. As the first light of dawn touches the eastern sky, the call comes. The recitation of the Quran begins. Guide us on the straight path, the path of those you have blessed, not those who have gone astray. Horns sound, kettle drums beat out a rhythmic pattern that will become as familiar as your own. Heartbeat over the coming weeks. The great caravan lurches into motion. The rhythm of desert travel. The caravan moves at the speed of a walking person, about 3 miles per hour. This steady, unhurried pace will continue for 8 to 14 hours each day, though in the heat of summer, travel takes place mostly at night and during the cooler hours of dawn and dusk. The motion of the camel becomes your world. Unlike a horse's gallop, the camel's gait is a rolling, swaying movement that rocks you gently back and forth. If you are riding rather than walking, alongside, you sit high above the ground in a wooden saddle covered with cushions and blankets. Some travelers prefer panniers, large baskets slung on either side of the camel, offering shade and protection from the sun. The landscape unfolds in patterns of ochre, gold, and rust. The Sahara is not uniformly sandy. Much of it consists of hamada, rocky, compact terrain that makes for easier travel than the great sand seas. But when you do encounter the erg, the vast fields of dunes, the challenge becomes immense. The camels sink hock deep into the powdery sand, grunting as they struggle upward, then surging forward on the downhill slopes. The caravan leader's skill becomes evident as he navigates these dune fields. He chooses routes that skirt the largest formations, finds passages between towering walls of sand, and somehow always knows where firm ground can be found. One wrong turn, one miscalculation could doom the entire caravan. The desert floor is littered with the bones of camels and, occasionally, humans who made fatal errors. The day develops its own rhythm. You depart at dawn when temperatures are still bearable. The morning light is clear and crystalline, revealing every contour of the landscape. The air smells of sand and camel and the faint spice of desert plants. As the sun climbs higher, heat begins to press down like a physical weight. Temperatures soar to 130 degrees Fahrenheit. The air shimmers and dances, creating mirages that show lakes and palm trees where none exist. At midday, the caravan stops. Tents are erected with practiced speed, providing precious shade. The camels are allowed to kneel and rest, though they are given no water. they will not drink until reaching an oasis. The men and women of the caravan seek shelter, eating sparingly of dried meat, dates, and millet cakes. Conversation is minimal. Everyone conserves energy during these brutal hours. Some try to sleep, though the heat makes true rest difficult. Others sit in the shade, checking equipment, mending gear, or simply waiting. The hours pass slowly. The sun seems to pause at its zenith, as if reluctant to continue its journey across the vast sky. As the sun begins its descent, the caravan stirs to life again. Tents are struck and loaded. The camels are urged to their feet with guttural commands and switches of rope. The ropes are checked, the strings reformed, and once more the horns sound. The afternoon journey begins. This second march often continues well into the night. The temperature drops mercifully as darkness falls and the stars emerge in breathtaking profusion. The Milky Way stretches across the sky like a river of light. The guides navigate by these celestial markers with the confidence of sailors reading charts. Finally, hours after darkness has fallen, the call comes to halt. The caravan forms a loose circle. Fires are lit, precious fires, for fuel is scarce and must be gathered wherever dead wood or dry dung can be found. Mint tea is brewed, sweet and restorative. A simple meal is prepared. Then, one by one, travelers unroll their sleeping blankets and lie down beneath the incomparable canopy of desert stars. The oases, islands of life. After days of travel across barren wastes, the sight of an oasis is almost miraculous. The Greek historian Herodotus described caravans stopping every 10 days at known oases, and this pattern remained consistent throughout the centuries of caravan trade. The anticipation builds as the caravan approaches an oasis. First comes the smell, a subtle change in the air, a hint of moisture and vegetation that seems impossible in this parched land. Then, if the wind is right, the sound of water, and finally, the sight that makes hearts lift and the voices cry out in joy, the green of palm trees rising from the sand. Date palms are the signature species of the oasis, drought and heat-resistant, growing readily wherever water lies close enough to the surface for their roots to reach. But creating and maintaining an oasis requires enormous human effort. Wells must be dug and maintained. Irrigation channels must be constructed to distribute water efficiently. The vegetation must be carefully managed to prevent opportunistic plants from monopolizing the water supply. Some oases are small, just a well, a few palm trees, and perhaps a simple structure for shelter. These serve as emergency stops where water skins can be refilled and weary travelers can rest for a few hours. But the great oases are towns unto themselves, sprawling across hundreds of square miles of cultivated land. At places like the Fezzan Group in Libya, Audilla, or the Kufra oases, the transformation from desert to fertile land is dramatic. Date palms create an upper canopy, their fronds rustling in the breeze. Beneath them grow lemon trees, fig trees, and smaller palms. Wheat and vines are cultivated using intricate irrigation systems. The air is cool and humid. Birds call from the trees. Butterflies flit among the flowers. The architecture of oasis settlements is distinctive. Buildings are constructed from the materials at hand, often including salt blocks in places like Tagaza, where the very houses are made from the commodity being traded. Walls are thick to insulate against the brutal heat. Courtyards provide private outdoor space where families can enjoy evening breezes. Water management is the foundation of oasis life. In some regions, ancient systems called Aflaj in Oman or Qanat in Persia bring water from distant aquifers through underground channels equipped with vertical shafts for maintenance and ventilation. These systems, some dating back thousands of years, are engineering marvels that made permanent settlement possible in the heart of the desert. When a caravan arrives at a major oasis, it enters a bustling center of commerce and culture. The marketplaces are scenes of controlled chaos. Merchants spread their wares beneath awnings and in open-fronted shops. The language is a babel of dialects, Berber tongues, Arabic, and languages. From far to the south, goods from across the known world change hands. Here, at last, the camels drink. They consume astonishing quantities of water, filling their bodies. Reserves for the next leg of the journey. The caravan members bathe, washing away days or weeks of accumulated dust and sweat. Clothes are laundered, equipment is repaired, news is exchanged -- word of conditions ahead, reports of bandit activity, information about markets and prices in distant cities. But the oasis offers more than physical refreshment. It is a place of cultural exchange. Scholars from different traditions meet and debate. Religious ideas spread as Muslim travelers carry Islam deeper into West Africa, while Christians and Jews contribute their own perspectives. Art and architecture blend influences from multiple cultures. Musical instruments from the north encounter rhythms from the south, creating new forms of expression. The dangers of the road. The romance of caravan travel should not obscure its very real dangers. The journey across the Sahara was brutal and hazardous, and many who attempted it never completed the crossing. The most obvious danger was the environment itself. Even with careful planning, water supplies could run short if wells proved dry or contaminated, if sandstorms delayed travel, or if the guide miscalculated distances. The consequences were swift and terrible. Dehydration killed quickly in the Sahara's heat. Medieval writers recorded the desperate measure of slaughtering camels to drink the water stored in their stomachs, a last resort that often bought only a few more days of life. The desert traveler Ibn Battuta described in his account how his party employed an artful means to prepare for water shortages. They would force camels to thirst for a full day and night before reaching a water source, then allow them to drink twice until their bellies were completely full. If water ran out between oases, these prepared camels could be slaughtered, their stomach contents drawn off into a container and drunk through a straw. sandstorms presented another mortal threat. These could arise with terrifying speed, turning day into night and making navigation impossible. The wind-driven sand was so fine it could infiltrate everything: clothing, food, water containers, even the airways of lungs. Lost caravans buried by sand became part of the desert itself. Centuries later, their remains might emerge from the dunes, testament to the power of these storms. The heat itself was a constant enemy. Heat exhaustion and heat stroke claimed lives regularly. The symptoms were insidious: first fatigue and confusion, then collapse and death. Experienced travelers recognized the signs and forced victims to rest in shade and drink water, but not everyone could be saved. Venomous creatures posed their own risks. Vipers and cobras inhabited rocky areas. Scorpions hid in cool places and emerged at night. Ibn Battuta himself was bitten by a desert serpent and had to cut off part of his finger at the joint to prevent the venom from spreading. The Berber guides laughed at his city dwellers' panic, claiming he would have been fine if the snake had not drunk water before biting him. Though whether this was true or merely teasing remains unclear. Then there were the bandits. Desert raiders had plagued caravans since the earliest days of trans-Saharan trade. In some periods, these bandits were so numerous and bold that their severed heads decorated the palace grounds of Sijil Masa as a warning. In other eras, the bandits transformed into protectors for a price. Berber tribes like the Masufa and the Sanhaja controlled certain routes and charged fees for safe passage. The relationship between caravan and potential attackers was complex. A well-armed, large caravan presented a difficult target and might pass unmolested. A smaller group, or one that appeared wealthy and poorly defended, invited attack. The guides had to negotiate this political landscape carefully, knowing which tribes required payment and which could be safely ignored. The caravan leader's skill extended beyond navigation and logistics to include diplomacy and tactical judgment should they travel during the cooler night hours when visibility was poor but temperatures more bearable. Even though darkness increased the risk of bandit attack, should they pay the demanded tribute to the local tribe or attempt to evade them by taking a longer route? Should they join with another caravan for mutual protection, even if it meant coordinating schedules and sharing resources? These decisions could mean the difference between success and disaster. A caravan that arrived safely with its cargo intact could make its merchants wealthy beyond imagination. One that was lost to the desert, to bandits, or to miscalculation brought financial ruin and often death. The treasures of trade. What goods were valuable enough to justify such risks? What commodities could bear the enormous costs of months of travel through one of the world's most hostile environments? Salt and gold dominated the trans-Saharan trade, but the full range of goods was much broader. Let us follow the flow of trade in both directions. From North Africa southward, salt was the primary cargo. This might seem surprising to modern minds, but in the tropical regions of West Africa, salt was desperately scarce and absolutely necessary for human life. The salt of Takaza was famous throughout the medieval world. It was mined by workers who lived in houses made of salt blocks, ate food preserved with salt, and slept under roofs of camel skin. The miners cut rectangular slabs directly from the desert floor, each weighing about 90 kilograms. These slabs were loaded onto camels and transported south. The journey from Tagaza to Timbuktu took about 3 weeks. Along the way, the caravan leaders charged a transportation fee of nearly 80% of the salt's value, a fee the market could bear because salt in Timbuktu was traded almost weight for weight with gold. Alongside salt traveled other goods from the Mediterranean world and beyond. Cloth was a major commodity, silks from China, cotton textiles from Egypt, wool fabrics from North Africa. These were luxury goods in West Africa, markers of status and wealth. Horses were also transported south, though the climate of the tropical zone was hard on animals bred in cooler regions. These horses became the mounts of kings and warriors, symbols of power and military might. Books were another crucial export from the north. The spread of Islam created demand for religious texts, and West African cities like Timbuktu developed sophisticated intellectual traditions. The great libraries of Timbuktu and Chingeti were built and sustained by the caravans that brought books. Across the Sahara, medieval treatises on astronomy, medicine, mathematics, philosophy, and of. Other goods included copper, which was valued for jewelry and artwork, perfumes and incenses, glazed ceramics, glassware from Egypt and Syria, beads of various materials, and cowrie shells that served as a form of currency. In West Africa, in the opposite direction, gold was king. The gold fields of Bambouk and Bure in West Africa produced metal of exceptional purity. This gold took many forms as it traveled north: bricks and bars for easier transport, blank coins ready to be stamped by mints in North Africa or Europe, and gold, dust carefully measured and stored in special leather pouches. The wealth generated by this gold trade was almost unimaginable. The Mali Empire, which controlled much of the West African gold trade in the 13th and 14th centuries, produced enough gold to make its ruler, Mansa Musa, likely the wealthiest individual in human history. When Mansa Musa made his famous pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324, he traveled with a caravan of 60,000 people and distributed so much gold in Cairo that the price of the metal plummeted throughout the Mediterranean, disrupting economies for years. Alongside gold came other products of West Africa. Ivory from elephant tusks was highly prized for. Carving kola nuts, a mild stimulant grown in tropical forests, became so popular that their use in West Africa sometimes approached addiction. These nuts were used in rituals and ceremonies, given as special presents between rulers, and chewed by travelers to suppress thirst and hunger during long desert crossings. Animal hides and leather goods traveled north, along with pepper and other spices from the tropical forests. Unfortunately, the caravans also carried enslaved people captured in wars or raids and transported north to serve as domestic servants, agricultural workers, or in some cases, highly trained slave soldiers. It is estimated that between the 10th and 19th centuries, some 6,000 to 7,000 slaves were transported north each year, a total that may have reached 9 million people over the full span of the trans-Saharan slave trade. The luxury of many of these goods meant that successful merchants could become extraordinarily wealthy. The profits from a single successful caravan might set up a merchant and his family for life, but the initial investment was also enormous, and the risks of loss were high. Caravans required considerable capital to organize, purchasing or renting camels, hiring guides and guards, buying merchandise, provisioning for months of travel, and paying the various fees and tributes demanded. Along the route, the great caravanserais. As trade routes became more established and lucrative, infrastructure developed to support them. The most important of these structures were the caravanserais, large guest houses or inns designed specifically to welcome traveling merchants. The word itself reveals its origins, a combination of the Persian words caravan, meaning caravan or group of travelers, and sara, meaning palace or enclosed building, with the Turkish suffix yay added. These buildings served a vital role in facilitating the passage of people and goods along the trade routes. The earliest caravanserai architecture can be traced to the oasis city of Palmyra in Syria, which developed from the 3rd century before the Common Era as a place of refuge for travelers crossing the Syrian desert. As trade routes developed and became more lucrative, caravanserai construction intensified, particularly from the 10th century onward. By the 19th century, a vast network stretched from China to the Indian subcontinent, through Iran, the Caucasus, Turkey, North Africa, Russia, and Eastern Europe. The basic design was remarkably consistent across this vast region. A typical caravanserai was a rectangular walled enclosure with a single portal wide enough to permit heavily laden camels to enter. Passing through this gateway, travelers entered a large courtyard open to the sky. The courtyard was where camels were unloaded and cargo inspected and weighed for tax purposes. The inner walls of the enclosure were lined with facilities. At ground level were stables and storerooms where animals could be housed and goods securely kept. Above these, reached by stairs, were small private rooms for the traveling merchants. These rooms were simple but provided essential shelter, a place to sleep safely, to store personal belongings, and to conduct private business negotiations. More elaborate caravanserais included additional amenities. A hammam or bathhouse allowed travelers to cleanse themselves of the dirt and sweat of the road. A mosque or prayer room served the spiritual needs of Muslim travelers. Some had rooms set aside for craftsmen who could repair damaged goods or equipment. Others included markets where local products could be purchased and caravan goods sold. The courtyard itself was the heart of the caravanserai. Here, merchants from different regions and cultures mixed and mingled, Languages had to be learned to communicate stories from the road. Local food, clothing, and etiquette blended with the merchants' own customs and goods. Religious, leading to exchanges of ideas that shaped the development of philosophy, law, and spiritual practice. Caravanserais also served as information exchanges. News traveled along the trade routes as fast as the caravans themselves. In some periods, under empires like the Mughals, in India, caravanserais were supplied with messenger horses specifically to pass along important news carried by travelers. Political developments, market conditions, reports of bandits or difficult passages, all this. Intelligence flowed through the caravanserais and helped subsequent caravans plan their journeys. In isolated locations, a caravanserai might be the only permanent structure for hundreds of miles. These remote outposts sometimes doubled as fortified strongholds, known as ribats or rebats, particularly those positioned near frontiers or borders. Their thick walls and defensible design could shelter travelers from bandits or provide a rallying point in case of attack. Cities that contained major caravanserais became great intellectual and cultural centers. Samarkand, Bukhara, Merv, Aleppo, Damascus, and many others grew wealthy and sophisticated on the trade that flowed through their gates. These were cosmopolitan places where ideas circulated as freely as goods, where the accumulated knowledge of multiple civilizations could be studied and synthesized. The caravanserai was more than just a practical accommodation. It represented a philosophy of trade and travel, the idea that commerce created common interests that transcended political rivalries and cultural differences. Within the walls of a caravanserai, merchants who might be enemies in other contexts found common ground in their shared journey and mutual interests. Across other deserts, while the trans-Saharan routes were the most extensive, caravans traversed many of the world's great deserts. Each region developed its own characteristics and traditions, but certain patterns remained consistent. The Silk Road, that legendary network of routes connecting China with the Mediterranean, passed through some of the world's most challenging desert terrain. The Taklamakan Desert, in what is now Western China, forced caravans to split into northern and southern routes that skirted its edges. This desert was so feared that travelers compared it to crossing a sea without water. The name itself may derive from a Uyghur expression meaning place of no return. In this region, the Bactrian camel, with its two humps and thick coat, replaced the single-humped dromedary. These hardy animals could withstand temperatures as low as -20 degrees Fahrenheit and were ideally suited to the cold winters of Central Asian deserts. They carried silk, porcelain, and lacquerware west, while bringing dates, saffron, frankincense, glass, and countless other goods east. The Silk Road caravans were often smaller than their Saharan counterparts, but no less important too. The civilizations they connected. Caravanserais dotted the routes at regular intervals. The cities of Samarkand, Bukhara, Merv, and Kashgar grew wealthy and powerful as trade centers. There, architecture blending influences from China, Persia, India, and the Mediterranean world. In Arabia, the incense route carried frankincense and myrrh from southern Arabia to the Mediterranean. These aromatic resins, used in religious ceremonies throughout the ancient world, could only be obtained from trees growing in specific regions of Yemen, Oman, and Somalia. The demand was so high and the supply so limited that these substances were traded almost literally for their weight in gold. The Nabateans, a people originally from the Arabian interior, dominated this trade for centuries. They carved spectacular tombs and cities into the sandstone cliffs of places like Petra and Hegra. Their sophisticated water management systems, with cisterns to capture rain and scores of wells, tapping underground aquifers allowed them to create thriving cities in the heart of the desert. The incense route followed a carefully planned path from one water source to another. Caravanserais provided rest and resupply. The journey from the frankincense groves of southern Arabia to the Mediterranean ports could take many months, and travelers faced all the familiar challenges of desert travel: heat, thirst, sandstorms, and bandits. In Persia and Central Asia, caravan routes crisscrossed the deserts and steppes, linking the civilizations of the Near East with those of China and India. These routes were marked at short distances by poles called mill. Political authorities took responsibility for establishing and maintaining caravan routes, keeping wells and springs in functioning order, establishing resting places at intervals of a day's journey, and constructing bridges to cross seasonal floods. In mountainous regions of western Persia and along the Caspian coast, caravans typically traveled by day. In the steppes and desert areas of Central Persia and Central Asia, however, they traveled by night and rested during the day when temperatures were more bearable. Each desert had its own personality, its own challenges and rewards. But across all these regions, certain truths held constant. Water was life. Navigation was art and science combined. The camel was indispensable. Community and cooperation were essential for survival, and the goods that passed along these routes were not merely commodities, but carriers of ideas, beliefs, technologies, and cultures that would shape the development of civilizations for thousands of years. Thank you for joining me on this journey through ancient sands. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and subscribe to The Sleep Room for more peaceful travel tales from around the world. Sweet dreams, and I'll see you in the next adventure. Did faced lives of servitude in foreign lands. This dark aspect of caravan trade cannot be forgotten or minimized. Consider also the oasis dweller, whose life was shaped by the rhythm of caravans. When a caravan arrived, it brought not just goods, but news, stories, sometimes long-awaited relatives or friends. The economic impact was significant. The oasis community would sell provisions, guide services, accommodation. The cultural impact was equally important. New ideas,